I'm Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North. We'll have reaction from Democratic and Republican lawmakers as the 2020 Minnesota legislative session staggered to a close with a special session a near certainty. The latest on the phased reopening of businesses and more in Minnesota as the state turns the dial ever so slightly. And as mask wearing becomes the new norm for the foreseeable future, do you know how to wear one correctly? It's all coming your way next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. Julie Zenner is off this week as we alternate hosting duties during the pandemic. This week's show was recorded on Thursday afternoon and includes pre-recorded interviews. Well, Minnesota lawmakers wrapped up a 2020 legislative session Monday that was dominated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The coronavirus forced lawmakers to change the way they normally conduct legislative business. This week, we have reaction from both Democratic and Republican House members. Greg Grell interviewed DFL Representative Liz Olson of Duluth about what the legislature was able to accomplish before its close.
Well, this legislative session really got disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. It came right as we were kind of getting into the heightened part of the session. And so the first big things we really did were the COVID-19 relief packages that we were able to put $400 million into a special fund to be used for COVID-19 relief and make sure our hospitals had what they needed. We were able to take care of small businesses and child care providers and do some things we just really needed to do to address the urgency of the situation. But beyond that, we did pass some really great legislation into law this year, including the Tobacco 21 legislation that passed just within the last few weeks here. We did a Drug Transparency Act around the high cost of drugs, prescription drugs. We were able to do the Alex Smith Insulin Affordability Act, which also happened earlier this session. So we've had some big successes, and obviously the epidemic or the pandemic really took over and we did what we could. And we have more work to do. We weren't able to get everything done, and I think people are very aware of that. And so the hope is to go back for a special session and do some more.
And going into that a little bit more in depth, what do you think some of your disappointments were this session that you weren't able to accomplish, you were hoping to accomplish when the session got started?
Yeah, a big one, I think, no surprise to anyone, is the bonding bill, the capital improvements, the infrastructure work. In Duluth in particular, we had a hefty list of projects that needed to get done and that were in the House version of the bonding bill that we brought to the House floor. And so that was disappointing, to say the least, that we weren't able to get that across the finish line. That's projects in every corner of the state and every legislative district that are just at a place of crucial need. And so that was a big disappointment. We weren't able to get that done. And I think that's probably top of the list. There's a number of other things as well, but that's top of mind and top of list.
Now, of course, we're in an unprecedented situation with COVID-19 and the different orders and things that are happening in the state. Do you believe the governor's orders have been appropriate and necessary due to what's happening around the world?
Yeah, I mean, the governor, we have one of the best departments of health in the nation. We have Commissioner Jan Malcolm is just top notch. Our epidemiologists are top notch. As we know, Minnesota's a leader in healthcare in a lot of ways. So the governor has been really listening to the experts around the decisions he's making. They're hard decisions, no doubt, for any governor to have to make, but he's using the science and the experts to make those decisions and has done that for the best of the people of Minnesota and our state, to keep our numbers where they are, to make sure we're not overcrowding ICUs. And he's really doing what he needs to, and I think has done a good job all in all. I mean, obviously there's pieces we may disagree with or what, but as a whole, I know he's done what he needed to do to protect the people of Minnesota. And I really stand by the decisions he's been making. And he's worked really collaboratively with the legislature when it's time for us to step in as well. We were there till midnight passing legislation that he was signing into law. So, I mean, we continue to have a functioning role within our government too as a legislative branch, which is really important. Even though he was doing the executive orders, we still had a big role in making and implementing a lot of the policy and funding as well.
What are you hearing from business owners and just constituents about the situation with the orders, and what are they telling you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hear kind of the gamut of things. There's what I would have called the silent majority that, are doing what they need to, keeping their head down, following the guidelines. And as things get dialed back to more of a regular functioning, we're seeing more of the restrictions get lifted. I'm hearing more and more from those constituents who are worried, worried maybe about having to go back to work as a bartender, worried about what it means for more people to be out, people, in nursing homes worried about their loved ones there. So I'm hearing a little bit more of that heightened anxiety from people that I hadn't heard from as now things start to get dialed back. I hear from business owners, that want to do what's right and are really worried about surviving this, but are also wanting to make sure that they respect the health and well-being of their workers as they open up. So I think it's a real balancing act that people are trying to do. And all in all, I think our community understands that we're really tied together and that we need to act in the best interest of not just ourselves, but everybody in the community.
What do you think the legislature could do to provide further assistance for some of these struggling businesses? I mean, we're hearing every day in the news, different businesses, especially restaurants, places like that maybe are not going to reopen. There's really a lot of pain right now in the business community.
Absolutely. And I think what we saw with the Federal CARES Act and how some of that funding came in, unfortunately, did not come to small businesses like the ones in our community that we're hearing about. It's greatly disappointing to hear that, how that first round of funding got allocated to businesses and really missed the people that have the least ability to survive the crisis. In the state, we were able to do some work around small business loans. There's more in the works. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, and one of the last meetings we had, I think it was the last meeting we had as a Ways and Means Committee, we processed a $50 million bill that would have gone to very small business relief for a lot of those that have the least ability to receive other types of funding. And so we're trying. You balance that with folks talking about the state of the economy and not wanting to spend any money. Heard that from my Republican colleagues. But in order to provide relief to small businesses and others, we do need to think about how we invest in that. So I think there is a time and a place, even in a crisis like this, that we still have the ability to allocate funds like that $50 million we're trying to get across the finish line in the House in the last days of session.
Now, looking ahead, it does look like there will be a special session of the legislature. You mentioned that earlier. Right now, we're talking about June 12th. Kind of give us an overview of what you think that session will look like. Will it be a quick one, or will it be quite a bit to deal with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really what it has to do with is the governor's special emergency powers would be expiring and would need us to come back and act. And so there's always a chance things could look different at that time and we don't have to come back. It's not a budget year. So unlike a budget year where if we weren't able to get a budget done, we would have to come back or face a government shutdown. We don't have that this year. So there's no pressure in terms of what we need to accomplish in that front. It really hinges on the crisis, the executive orders, and the emergency authority that the governor has is why we would be going back. That said, in the event we're able to go back, which I'm hopeful we will, that's where we could also finish up some of the unfinished business like the bonding bill. Or some local government aid. We'd been talking about perhaps a tax bill with some aid for our local governments as well. So I think there's still more to do that could be done during that time, but nothing's a guarantee. But that is the chatter right now as we'd be looking at probably a June 12th session that maybe a day session, maybe a few days remains to be seen.
All right. Well, Representative Liz Olson, DFL Duluth, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck if that special session happens.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Then late on Wednesday, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz announced the very latest phase in the reopening of the state in the midst of this pandemic. New June 1st guidelines fell short of what some were hoping for. We talked with Republican Representative Sandy LAYMAN of Cohasset about the update from the governor.
I am pleased, obviously, that the governor is continuing on a positive path of safely reopening the state. I don't envy him his job. It's a tough one, and I'd like to see a few more movements to turning the dial than maybe he's doing. But I'm pleased to see that the restaurants will be able to have outdoor dining. Of course, that doesn't work for every restaurant, and not everybody, especially in Minnesota. We're not outdoors more than 3 or 4 months out of the year. So it will work for a few. I'm afraid that some restaurants will not make it. We've seen many restaurants close already, not just in greater Minnesota, but in the Twin Cities. My goodness, some of our popular favorite restaurants just are not making it. So, it's just this careful balancing act between our health care, our mental health, and our economic health. And I think that some of us would like to see a little more attention paid to the economic and the mental health, as well as, really watching the COVID situation. But the other thing I'm concerned about, I'm hearing from our churches so much. And from what I heard with the latest announcement from the governor, is that churches still can't open. And even in the next phase, they'll be limited to outdoor gatherings of 10. Even when restaurants will be open to having a small number indoors, churches will still be limited to outdoors. So he was questioned about that in a press conference that he had. And I think I heard from him a little hesitancy that he's going to look at that a little bit. But there's some areas like that that I think as a legislator, we'd like to have a little more input. We're so close to our communities, especially in the House of Representatives. We're kind of the people's house. We feel like we have a really good sense of where our people are. Boy, we sure hear from them. And we'd like to be able to share that on a more regular basis with the governor.
And speaking of your constituents, what are you hearing from the local business owners in your district as far as what they're getting back as far as the opening, and what would they like to see?
Well, they would like to, I'm in a tourist area, as you are. And so I've especially been hearing from campgrounds. So I think the campgrounds are happy because campgrounds can be open with some limitations with this latest turn of the dial. They would like to be open for Memorial Weekend. Some of the campgrounds, that's their biggest, opening. And once they miss those visitors, they might, the campers will find other places to go. So, happily that June 1st campgrounds will be open. But I'm hearing quite a bit from the people that rely on the tourist industry because they wait all year long for this. This is their revenue generating period, and it's only about 13 weeks. So they're very anxious. Resorts are happy that they can be open. Looks like now if they have some outdoor seating, they can probably do that as well, so they can have some congregate events, which are all part of the resort experience. But I'm really happy about the campgrounds. I also understand that charter boats will be able to, so further north from us, quite a bit, and even south from us in the Mille Lacs area, work a lot with charter boats. I think our retailers are very happy. They've been really suffering, our small mom and pop retailers that have seen their larger competition be open through all of this. I'm hearing that Target is going gangbusters. They're just, earning record revenues, as you can imagine, because people are having to go to, where they can. So I think our small retailers, they're slowly opening, and they're doing it with safeguards. I just had my oil changed, and the fellows at the counter had the plastic guard, between the customers and them. And I think we're going to see that's going to be kind of the standard protocol in our small businesses.
Now, of course, the legislative session, the regular session just wrapped up. Talk a little bit about what you think some of the accomplishments were this legislative session.
Well, I think that this was the pandemic session. This was unbelievable. Um, I have to say one of the biggest accomplishments was in the way we actually quickly moved from a legislature that meets in person at the Capitol to a legislature that meets remotely. Frankly, it's amazing we did anything, because our work really depends on those hallway conversations. I mean, we can agree on 3 bills by the time we get to the end of the hallway at the Capitol. And when you don't have that and you have to schedule a Zoom meeting or a phone call or what have you, and it's one-on-one instead of a couple people sitting down, it's really difficult. So we didn't see a lot of other kind of bills go through. We came together around the pandemic, and we worked in a really bipartisan fashion. So I think that's a positive. We were all in this together. We really were at the legislature. And we took it quite seriously, and we had to quickly move some money out the door. And we did that to the tune of about $500 million. We also were quick to respond. The state of Minnesota is involved in people's lives in so many ways. And so we had to release some restrictions and do some things like delay deadlines for permits and licenses. One of the things I think that's positive that will outlast this pandemic is some of the laws and rules that we loosened up around telework and telemedicine, allowing insurance companies, or actually mandating insurance companies to reimburse for telemedicine, and including mental health in that mix. Sort of making more people look at telework. I think there'll be more people working from home after this than we have in the past, and then allowing more public meetings to take place like this. I think once we can meet face to face, there'll still be times, especially us in greater Minnesota, it's great for us to be able to connect with the Twin Cities remotely like this. And so I think we'll see some positives coming. But then beyond the pandemic and the COVID legislation, we did some other good things too. We passed an insulin bill. We had some election security measures that we put into place. We did some broadband funding. And so we got some of those things across the line. A lot of our other bills, most of my bills I was working on got lost because we stopped the committee process that we were in the midst of. And my claim to fame is in the last half hour before sine die, I had one of my bills make it through. It was a small bill for Itasca County and Harris Township. And I dogged that thing all the way to the end, and by golly, I got it through. So we took that, we took every victory where we could in this very unusual circumstance.
Now, it sounded like Representative Layman that there is going to be a special session, and one thing that may be addressed there is the bonding bill, the capital projects bill that did not make it through in the final hours. What do you think the special session would look like if it does happen?
Yeah, well, I'd say I'm about 90% positive we will have a special session. It has to be called by the governor, though we can't call it. It's up to him. And we think it's going to happen probably around the time that his peacetime emergency powers expire. They expire every 30 days. I think Governor Walz wants to continue those powers. And if he wants to do that, he needs to call us back into session, because he can only do it while the legislature's in session. So we're thinking that might happen around June 12th. That's a date you're going to hear. Most of us want a bonding bill. And I think that we are quite a ways down the road with that, because the governor has put out his bonding bill, and the House has put out their bonding bill, and the Senate has put out their bonding bill. And so that's a lot of progress. There's quite a bit of difference in the size. The governor is about 2 million. The House is about 2.5 million, and Senate was a little less than I'm talking millions, billions. So 2.5 billion from the House, 2 billion from the governor, a little less than $1 billion from the Senate. So now everybody's got something on paper. My expectation is that people will be talking. They're not going to stop talking. And so that by the time we do get to a special session, we'll be ready to really move on a bonding bill.
All right. Well, Representative Sandy Layman, a Republican from Cohasset, thanks so much for your time today, and good luck with that special session.
Thank you so much. Pleasure being with you.
Meanwhile, Wisconsin bars and restaurants are now fully open after the state Supreme Court threw out the Safer at Home order, though restrictions are still in place in Minnesota. Beginning June 1st, limited outdoor dining will be allowed under Minnesota's plan. Here's more from the state's news conference.
Starting June 1st, restaurants and bars can be open for outdoor dining only. We have clear evidence from the health experts that outdoor settings are a lot safer than indoor settings, and so we're making that move to have outdoor dining begin to become an option. Of course, 6 feet between tables, all the social distancing rules that have been in place from the beginning still apply. No more than 50 total people at an outdoor setting for a restaurant to keep that cap at a manageable level. And then in terms of the party size, we're asking that people keep it to 4 total or 6 if you're a family. So trying to limit the party size of folks at our restaurants, again, to try to limit the unpredictability of that environment. Reservations will be required, so you can't just walk in. And we're asking that all workers in these settings wear masks, and we're strongly encouraging customers to wear masks too. And really, this is about the safety of workers, right? As workers come back in that environment, if customers are wearing masks, especially when they're interacting, when they're giving their order to a waiter, what have you, that does help prevent the spread to workers who are taking that risk to come in and serve you. So we're requiring workers to wear masks, strongly encouraging patrons to wear masks. We get it, you can't wear a mask and eat and drink, so there's some practical things here where you have to take the mask off, but having that mask when you come in, using it when you're having conversation, removing it to eat and drink is the critical guidance. Now, obviously not every restaurant has an outdoor deck or a patio or a ready-made place to sit and have this kind of interaction, and so we are eager to see municipalities get a little creative here and get a little innovative with restaurants to find ways to make makeshift outdoor space work. We know that different cities have different zoning restrictions on this, and we ask that they get creative and find ways to make that possible for restaurants who might not have access to that space. My colleagues at MnDOT are looking into ways to find right-of-ways and sidewalks and parking spaces that might be available for outdoor dining, and they'll be releasing some guidance and thoughts on that coming soon. But I think just as we've seen restaurants innovate on curbside delivery and pickup, we're going to see this new round of innovation for outdoor seating. And some restaurants have it, and it's part of their business model. Others will have to create it, but an important step forward to begin to get that dine-in happening in a safe and thoughtful manner. The second area that we'll be changing as of June 1st is personal care services. This is the barbers, the hair salons, the nail salons, the tattoo parlors. These happen generally indoors. There's not a lot of outdoor barbers out there. So we do recognize it has to happen inside. But we're limiting capacity to 25%. And when I say limit capacity, it's 25% of the fire code. So every business out there has a sort of max capacity fire code. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about these percentages of the fire code. It's that percentage that you have in your OSHA requirements. Masks are required for both the patron and the worker in this use case. Obviously, you're getting a haircut or a tattoo. There's someone, you're pretty close. You're within 6 feet. So wearing a mask is required for both workers and clients in those settings. Appointment only, no walk-ins. So 25% capacity then for personal care services. And then campgrounds and charter boats, we're also making a shift on June 1st. We're allowing those operations to take place. Campgrounds, of course, we'll need to take care to make sure that the campsite configuration is socially distant. There's common areas in campgrounds, so we got to get that right too. We have some clear guidelines on social distancing there and sanitation plans for these common areas. You can find all that on the DNR website. Charter boats too. So charter boats are allowed to resume activity with appropriate social distancing on those boats, so 6 feet or more between both the crew and the captain, unless you're all a family, and then it's okay to be close as per the usual guidelines. So lots more on the DNR's website there to take a look at. So those are the 3 big changes coming on June 1st. And I just want to remind people sort of what remains the same, because I think that's important to know too. So the guidance that remains the same is that gatherings of 10 or less is the limit for gatherings out and about. If you're a business that can telework, you have to telework. This is a must, not a should. Telework is critical if you can get that done, and so that remains the guidance as well. Non-critical businesses, same thing. For retail, we're still at that 50% capacity, as we mentioned before. Churches remain at the same guidance as we had before, which is indoors 10 people or less, or outdoors 10 folks or less, or drive-in services, which we've seen churches really innovate on. Bringing folks into the parking lot and sitting in cars is a new way to get this right, and so we encourage churches to look into options like that.
As businesses and other places continue to reopen, there are new rules to follow in an effort to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. For some time now, it's been highly recommended to wear a mask whenever you are out in public. But not everyone knows the proper way to wear and take care of a mask. Here is a helpful video tutorial from Itasca County Health Department Manager Kelly Chandler.
First step that should always be done is to wash your hands with soap and water. And that is always preferable. I am not sitting by a sink right now, so I will use hand sanitizer. It's over 60% alcohol and will clean my hands. I will then take my mask, and I'm holding it by the elastic strings, and I will place it over my nose and under my chin. Very important that you're not allowing those areas of your mouth and nose that expel droplets to not be covered. If you see people wearing them under their nose or over their chin, that is an incorrect way to wear it. This mask is not going to prevent you from contracting a virus just based on the size of the particles. However, it can help prevent droplets from when you cough or sneeze and are unable to social distance from reaching others. We do not encourage you to purchase medical grade surgical or N95 masks, as these are continuing to be in short supply and are very much needed for our healthcare professionals. As far as care of the mask, depending on your use, launder daily, washing machine and dryer, launder if they're soiled or wet, and store them in a clean, dry space. Cloth face masks should not be used on young children under the age of 2, anyone who has trouble breathing or is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the mask itself. Once you are finished wearing the mask, remove it via the straps. And then again, repeat the hand washing or the hand sanitizer.
Thanks, Kelly. Great advice, and certainly a necessary inconvenience to keep the virus in check. And you can follow Almanac North on our social media sites while you are helping to slow the pandemic. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and visit the WDSE website for program updates and more information about special COVID-19 programming here at the station. And thanks to our crew here in the studio for their work tonight. I'm Dennis Anderson. Enjoy the Memorial Day weekend, everybody, and be kind.